So, hey everybody. So, welcome to Arms and Armor Month. October is traditionally associated with arms and armor, the entire world over. Why they chose October to celebrate arms and armor, I have no idea, but I can take a good guess at it. So if you look at our suited friends right here, um, all this stuff took place pretty much in Europe, right? So, if you put yourself in the place of a medieval knight, winter maybe wasn't the best time of year. You have to deal with snow, coldness, especially in Europe, as you know. January, February may not be a good month to celebrate the arms and armor. Likewise, summer was notoriously hot, especially if you're wearing something like this, right? So summer is out of the question. You could pick April, May, and spring. That would be nice. However, I think most people's focus was on the ground and all the little flowers popping up. So that leaves fall. And so, you know what? What better time than now in October to celebrate arms and armor? There's coolness in the air. It's a perfect temperature to wear something like this, right? You can go around and you wouldn't sweat. You wouldn't get be cold. It's just the perfect time. So I imagine there's other reasons too, but we'll go with that one. So once again, October celebrates Arms and Armor Month, and this is across the entire world. So what I wanted to do today was just give you guys a little brief background insight into a typical suit of armor. If you have not yet seen my earlier video, 8 Minutes with a Medieval Knight, I'd highly encourage you to do that. It's really good, came out great, and it actually displays all the stuff in my collection. Side note, all the armor that you see in this video and in my earlier video are exact replicas of originals made in medieval Europe. This Gothic suit of armor was made in Germany, and it's made to the exact specifications of the original from early 15th century. So I'm really proud of it. And some of these guys, all of these guys that are in the armoring business, they really take their work seriously. They supply museums with supplemental pieces for their collections. And it's really an honor and a privilege to own just one piece of armor from one of these master armorers. So again, these are high quality, exact replicas of originals, right to the bone. So, wanted to give you guys a little bit of background into just one example of a suit of armor. This is known as a Gothic suit of armor. Now, first off, Gothic, where do we get that word from? You may know that word is associated a lot with medieval Europe, religious things, specifically cathedrals that were built in the Middle Ages in Europe, right? You think of right off the bat Notre Dame in Paris, right, with the flying buttresses and the gargoyles, right? If you look at that cathedral very closely, you'll see a lot of angles, a lot of points. It's called Gothic, and it was associated mainly with an interesting design period during that period of time. Analogous to, for those old folks watching this video, Art Deco. Now, Art Deco, if you remember, was an artistic design in the early 1920s here in the United States, and it didn't last too long. It only lasted a few years, but it was very, very unique, very, very intricate with angles and points and straight lines. You'll see what I mean if you look at it. But a lot of buildings and stuff were made in the Art Deco style. Didn't last too long, and analogous to that, I would say, would be Gothic armor. Gothic armor only existed for about 20 years, really short period of time, from about 1420 to 1440. Then it, of course, evolved after that. Armor was always evolving, and you got into more elaborate designed armor. But for our purposes, I really like this piece. I think it's the quintessential classic piece of medieval armor, the Gothic suit of armor. So wanted to hone in on it. You'll pardon me if I bring out my school age pointer. We'll go from head to toe just as a quick rundown, just to give you guys, and again, if you haven't seen my earlier video, it goes a little bit more in depth into the styles of the armor, how it was made, the gradients of steel, that sort of thing. So for our purposes, we'll just focus in on this guy. But Armour, of course, very, very detailed. Can't say enough about the master armorers themselves. Really great guys, know what they're doing when it comes to making this stuff. So right off the bat, we'll start with the helmet, right? You'll notice a rounded top helmet. Now, if you remember, I'll put my pointer down for a bit. If you remember from your grammar school stories of old, the King Arthur legend, right? The King Arthur legend talked about the medieval look in probably the 11th and the 12th century. Now, that's a lot different design than Gothic. Here's an example, pardon me, of a helmet from the 13th century. This is your classic medieval King Arthur style helmet, right? You'll notice it's a lot different than that one up there. Why so? Most notably the top. Top is flat. Okay, so you could probably figure this out if you think about it. Real easy. What happened? What was the reason why they went to a rounded top like that versus a square top? Pretty easy. If an opponent came with a warhammer or an axe or a sword, went like that, you may not get hurt, you may not get injured, but you're going down, right? It's going to cut a blow into you and it's going to put you on the ground. Okay, so what did they do to solve that? Okay, roundabouts 1300 or so, they came out, they figured out the problem, and they came out with what's called a bassinet helmet. And of course, this is called a pig-faced bassinet. Why? Does it look like a pig face? I don't know. But anyway, this was the classic helmet from about late 13th century into the mid 14th century, 1280 to about 1370. Again, rounded top so that if you took a blow to the helmet, it would deflect off of it, right? The sword would deflect off of it, or the battle axe. Also, this helmet was used a lot in lancing with jousting, if you know, a very interesting part of armory. You can look at my earlier video for some interesting facts on that. Also, as a side note, with this style of helmet, you'll notice, if you can zoom in here, this side of the helmet has a lot more air vents than this side. And because it was used for jousting, the strategy was to fortify this side of the helmet, because obviously as the joust is coming from your left side, you're strengthening this side to limit impact. Had the joust hit this side, it probably would have crushed the guy's face. So interesting design. And remember, medieval armorers were always innovating, always thinking about advantages and learning from their mistakes, right? Notably the flat top to the rounded top. So this is an example, again, of a classic medieval bassinet helmet. So continuing down, wanted to point out a couple of things. As you see here, again, the design of the helmet is really important. Notice also the slit for the eyes. Very, very narrow, right? The strategy was to, again, limit the ability for an opponent to get a sword or a lance in there. So the narrower it was, the more protective it was. However, the limited visibility you had, right? You could only see basically forward and a little bit of periphery, but basically nothing down and nothing above. So what you had to do was kind of calculate where your footing was going to be, maybe 20 or 30 yards in advance, right? Because you couldn't see down. So that was the idea behind the slitted eye sockets, which you'll see in later helmets. So going down, this part, very, very important. Again, before classic armor was designed, before this type of armor was designed, in the Arthurian days of old, that was exposed. Your neck was exposed. You might have had some chainmail there, but for the most part, it was exposed. And obviously, anything exposed, well, you were vulnerable. So they came up with a design called the bevor, and this obviously protects the neck area from being exposed. However, there's one thing, and you could probably figure out by looking at this, this suit of armor is still vulnerable, right? You have here and you have here that's not plated with armor. That's because you really couldn't put armor there because the way where the arms move, and you can ask a physical therapist about this, it's impossible to put something there. You really have to have that open in order to move, right? Swing a sword, do a lance, that type of thing. So those were the only two vulnerable areas that you had in a suit of armor. However, they did add chainmail, and if you see my earlier video, you'll know a little bit more about chainmail. But chainmail it was okay, but it wasn't obviously as protective as plate steel. So chainmail was the solution for under the armpits. But going down, again, you'll see, again, the Gothic design, the pointed sleeves of the armor. Again, you'll see different sleeves here, different scallops, so to speak. That's because the more scalloped, so to speak, a piece of armor was, like a breastplate, the more mobility you had, as opposed to earlier armor, which was basically one piece of armor. It wasn't too mobile, right? So they had to constantly innovate that. Okay, the gauntlet. And I have a sample gauntlet here that I picked up from my friends in Toledo, Spain. Toledo, of course, was a very renowned medieval city for arms and armor. So this piece, compliments of a local armorer that I went to, is a classic piece of Gothic armor. It's a gauntlet, right? A hand piece. And you'll notice, in addition to the very sloped and pointed design, again, paralleling the cathedrals of Europe, the armorer went ahead, and if you can see this very closely, it's a very, very intricately designed, etched spiritual figure on there. Maybe a saint, maybe an angel, that sort of thing. And again, the whole philosophy was when a knight put on a Gothic suit of armor, not only was he going into battle with a good defensive piece of armor on him to protect him from being killed, but he was also doing it for the glory of God, so to speak, right? If he had, these little emblems on it, these little decorations, these cathedral-like spires on his armor, he felt more, fulfilled. His mission was more clear, and it just added to the whole, philosophy of battle. Kind of, a play on words there, but maybe ironic. But again, the whole philosophy was, battle was necessary. Of course, nobody wants war, but war was a necessity. And when you can do it with the blessings of God, not only mentally but physically, while wearing something like this, then it only makes you stronger, right? So that's a common strategy. So this is also made out of plate steel. This is actually, if you could feel it, you can't, but this is actually 14 gauge armor, very heavy, and it's really impenetrable. Very good, very very. Wouldn't want to not miss this on the battlefield. Okay, so just continuing down along, as you see, leather, of course, was a big industry in medieval Europe. Actually, leathersmiths, if that's a word, were just as popular as armorers because they had to supply leather to hold the pieces in place. You'll see this piece right here protects the top of the leg bone. So, the leathersmith was really working side by side with the master armorer in positioning the buckles and the sizes, because each suit of armor was made to fit the knight. They were custom made. There was no one size fits all, or small, medium, large, nothing like that. The knight actually had to go and solicit from the armorer. The armorer would take his measurements, and the suit of armor would be made. Very expensive too. No, not cheap. Okay, so going down, as you'll see, again, the slope design, the angles, the points. So you'll notice, if I can get my feet out of the way, down here, you might notice, first of all, I have what's called saran wrap on my greaves and my sabatons, my feet pieces. Why do I have saran wrap on there? Well, for those of you who have pets at home, it's the quick solution. As you know, with a pet running around, they're shaking their mouths a lot, they're sneezing, and when they do that, water droplets can get on your armor, especially the lower parts, right? So the solution to that is to put saran wrap, because if I didn't, that armor would rust in a matter of days. Water is the #1 enemy of plate armor. Water, and as I explained in my earlier video, this is what's made out of carbon steel, what's called carbon steel, as opposed to stainless steel, which wasn't invented until a couple hundred years later, right? So carbon steel is very susceptible to rust. This type of armor had to be oiled, and it had to be waxed constantly. It was always being maintained, and that was the task of the squire, the knight's helper. So you may have noticed, why am I wearing blue nitrile gloves? Okay, there is a reason for it. Okay, so as I just explained, this is made out of carbon steel, as opposed to stainless steel, which hadn't been invented till a couple hundred years later. Okay, so carbon steel is very, as I explained about my pets, very susceptible to rust by water and other things. If I were to touch this armor with my bare hands, within a matter of days, you would get fingerprint rust marks on the armor. That's because, again, it's not stainless; it's stained full steel, if that's a word. So the reason for the nitrile gloves. But so obviously, as you can see, the necessity to protect armor day in and day out, since it was being used constantly out in the weather, in the elements, was totally vital. Really needed to oil it regularly and wax it. So that's the reason for the gloves. So let me get my feet back out of the way and show you one last point about the sabatons, which were the feet coverings. If you can zoom in close here, I don't know if you can, but again, the Gothic design, the pointed toes. If you look at it right here and you were to gauge a shoe size, you would probably say this is like a size 15. But in actuality, the shoe size was a normal shoe size for a person, 10, 11, something like that. But the extension, of course, and the point was, again, it was an embodiment of the Gothic style, and in relation, an analogy to those cathedrals that we mentioned. So these points that you see here on the tips of the toes are actually very conservative. There was actually a period of about a 5 or 10 year period within that Gothic period of 20 years where the points would actually extend way, way, way up, maybe another 10 inches above. It was really wild looking, something very strange. But again, it was the master armorer's design, and it was his intention to instill a sense of not only art, but this glory to God philosophy into a suit of armor. So so that's a good example. And I know there's more you can go into, but this was just a brief precursor type of thing into a Gothic suit of armor. So again, if you haven't checked out my earlier video, 8 Minutes with the Medieval Knight, do it now. You'll love it. Hope to see you next time when we get into a little bit more, perhaps. And remember, October is Arms and Armor Month. Take care.